Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this, the latest EuroACE webinar. We're delighted this morning to have a great panel of speakers for you, and I will introduce those shortly. We're also delighted that we're addressing a topic that's becoming more and more important as we think about the renovation wave, and that is improved indoor air quality. So first of all, I'm Adrian Joyce. I'm the Secretary General of EuroACE, and I'm going to start with housekeeping rules. During the entire webinar, you're asked to remain muted. It'll be only the speakers and myself as moderator that will be unmuted while we're speaking. Please no cameras throughout the entire duration of the webinar, as that helps to maintain bandwidth and stability. We will have a question and answer session where you'll be able to pose your questions to all of the speakers. And in order to animate that, please use the chat box in this platform to ask your questions, but keep them as concise and precise as possible. I will then try and group them together and address them to the relevant speakers. If time doesn't allow for us to answer all the questions during the event, we will try to do that by written procedure afterwards and come back to each of you. And yes, the PowerPoint you're about to see will be circulated together with a recording of this webinar and posted on our website. So for those of you who don't know us, and just very briefly, EuroACE Energy Efficient Buildings gathers together an alliance of companies working for energy efficiency in buildings in Europe. We were founded already 22 years ago, and we have worked throughout that entire period on high-level EU policy, always bringing together holistic answers to policy questions around energy performance of buildings. Our companies, and here are their logos, the 14 members, have more than 200,000 employees at more than 900 production facilities and office locations throughout the EU. And because of the cross-sectoral representativeness, you can see why we call for holistic and integrated solutions in our work. Our belief is that improving energy efficiency in buildings, especially now renovating existing buildings, is the most cost-effective method of creating employment and securing economic growth and recovery, alleviating energy poverty in the long term, providing people with comfortable and healthy homes, the subject of today's webinar, meeting carbon reduction targets, and enhancing energy security for the European Union as a whole. We also run the Renovate Europe campaign, which is an EU-wide political communications campaign, which focuses exclusively on very high ambition for the renovation of the building stock in the EU, seeking to make it highly energy efficient and decarbonized by 2050. We're supported by 46 partners, including 18 at national level, and we have high political support through champions that work together with us for the achievement of our aims. So this morning's webinar comes at a very timely moment. We know with the COVID crisis how important indoor environmental and air quality is, because we've all now been living within our homes for months on end, living, working, and enjoying ourselves within our homes. We've nowhere else to go, many of us. And we see that in the Renovation Wave strategic communication launched in October, that the European Commission is broadening the dialogue beyond energy efficiency and energy performance and looking more closely at environmental issues, including indoor air quality. Furthermore, just a few days ago, the European Environmental Agency released a report on air quality in Europe, and we'll put the link up in the chat box. And also tomorrow afternoon, there's a webinar by the World Green Building Council on their health and well-being framework, a very relevant event coming up. So today we're innovating a bit. We're going to have two impulse statements, or setting out the view, first of all, from the European Commission, and secondly, from a key expert stakeholder on issues surrounding indoor air quality and why it is so important. Then we're going to have a round of reactions by 4 of our own companies, and they will be short, concise reactions, but will allow the audience to see the breadth of experience and knowledge that our members hold. Then we'll have our question and answer session, and we will end with a short presentation, again from the European Commission, talking about how the Renovation Wave strategy links with the indoor air quality agenda. And for information, Pau Garcia Audi will just join us for that part, so will not have had the advantage of hearing the earlier presentations. So with that, I'm going to go immediately to the first speaker, and I'm delighted to welcome Manfred Fuchs from DG Grow. He is a senior policy assistant and a specialist in indoor air quality. Manfred, the floor is yours. If you can unmute yourself and direct me, and I will move the slides forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have a little bit of problem that our commission is not allowing certain communication tools, so I'm doing this via phone, and I have to give Adrian now the sign all the time to change the slides. What you will hear right now is instruments how to achieve indoor air quality, in particular going away from the point, oh my God, we are facing a lot of chemicals, we are facing a lot of risks. So we start with the terrible things. In reality, it's a technical problem like fire safety, like accessibility, like energy efficiency. It's something where there is already quite some knowledge available, and there are the technical means to do something about it. And I will present now some of the instruments that the Commission has put in place to help designers, construction companies, and building managers to facilitate their work and to ensure that indoor air quality can be achieved. So the main thing right from the beginning is, no matter what we do, it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy principle on the second slide: don't panic. We are going for technical solutions, no matter what chemicals are can have an effect. That's a secondary issue. So on the third slide, we have to look into this whole thing from a holistic approach. So we have to include, as Commission already, contact, include in the discussion, include in the instruments, people dealing at the different stages of the building. I have put here also the occupant behavior, because in the end, it's also a question, how much does anybody living in an apartment, working in an office, and I'm thinking now about the pre and the post-corona phases, how much are they in control of their immediate environment, and what are they doing? So a lot of the design, the installation, and the selection of products could be perfect, and still a lot of things can go wrong at a later stage. This is the most tricky one, because here the occupant behavior is very different in different parts of the European Union. You see it already with different designs, where to put specific rooms, where to put specific activities. So therefore, the Commission is not trying to put a lot of effort here, because here in the principle of subsidiarity, it's much easier to deal with these elements at the national, regional, and even local level. What we are looking for is mostly the design, the installation, and the selection of products, partly now with a new instrument, also the management of buildings. What does it mean as such? So design is up to a certain extent a matter of the national and regional building codes, but there is also another instrument, which is the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, where the Commission this case only is really putting a strong mark itself into this whole thing, but only coming from one direction. And the EPBD has, of course, then created the problem of, or the criticism of, okay, we are creating a tight envelope, therefore the quality indoor could be worse. This is getting a little bit too short in the argument, because also outdoor air is not necessarily automatically better. In some cases, the tight envelope is also protecting the people inside. So therefore, it's a matter of how and which quality of air you are exchanging in the rooms, which is the installation part. And here it's exactly the point that you can also have a very good system of heating, of air conditioning in the design, but in the practical implementation, and this is what I got from a lot of people who were working as controlling engineers then later, the design is perfect. In theory, everything should work fine, but somebody on the construction site made a shortcut, and based on different installations not foreseen, some of the positive effects are neutralized. So the installation is a part that comes to an element where we have the interface between design and the construction products, partly with the we are discussing right now in the construction products regulation, in the revision of, or the potential revision of the CPR, to provide more information, more precise information on installation and maintenance and management of products. If this is going through, so this becomes a more important and relevant element also for technical standardization of products, then this could be an instrument also to help to increase the preciseness and the quality of the information that is provided for the people who are actually installing products. Now coming to the main part where the Commission is busy on the next slide, we have the source control. So in reality, this is the part where the Commission is moving in, mostly because you shouldn't forget that a lot of the work of the Commission is actually market, the internal market. That was the baseline of the work starting. And therefore, it's a question of which chemicals, which products could actually move around. What are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to fulfill when it comes to health and safety requirements? The main thing that exists, the umbrella over everything, is most likely REACH, but for the practical use in the built environment, it's not that important. It sets more limit values in general, and it's very much based on content, the measurement and the declaration of content. That doesn't exclude, of course, the next step, that there is a calculation and a conversion factor to identify what could be the emission factor here. But nevertheless, REACH is focusing on highly dangerous substances, not necessarily therefore in the right way or completely what might be relevant for indoor air quality. Here, there is a different instrument that helps to identify certain risk levels, and that's the EU LCI. LCI stands for lowest concentration of interest. So years ago, our colleagues in the Joint Research Center in the Commission and experts from the member states have been working on threshold values based on a very precisely defined scientific process of evaluating data, evaluating research, and identifying at what level is the concentration in indoor air too high and therefore to be considered a health risk. This list is now in its final steps. It's not legally binding. It's available on the Commission's website, but we have about now 160 substances, which is a little bit too much actually for anybody to read, but it gives you a certain indication where the focus should be. And you couldn't use just values for indoor air if you don't have a measurement to detect emissions. And again, we are talking about source control. We are talking about emissions from construction products into indoor air. There has been standardization work going on in CEN, the European Standardization Institute, and in particular, the standard 16516 for the emission is a relevant part, but there's also an interesting element included, that's the reference room, so that we are also able to identify, okay, what is the contribution of the flooring, the wall covering, the ceiling, and therefore also give a relation of the material and the product vis-a-vis the emission of the whole indoor air environment. And with these instruments now, what could you, where and how could you do this and use it? Sorry. In the last slides, we're coming to the part where exactly the design and the management is the important thing. I will not talk here about the Renovation Wave because that's a whole block for a colleague of mine in DG Energy who has been much more involved in this work than myself. I have already mentioned the EPBD as setting certain elements for energy efficiency, but exactly because of this link to indoor air quality, this is an element where also more guidance, more pressure might come in future to identify also and to reduce the fear that actually with a tight envelope you are actually creating another and more serious problem by creating higher concentrations of specific substances in indoor air. New instruments here, a new instrument as such, the first one is levels. Levels is as such more a concept of providing information for designers as a grassroots movement to think about sustainability in buildings, but you don't want to go the whole way to the highly elaborated, time-consuming and expensive private schemes that are in place, but to address more people on the ground who are doing design, who are doing construction, to say, okay, what do I have to keep in mind when I look for a sustainable building? Focusing only on a few indicators. They are based on targets as such. So it's not just let's describe a building, let's label a building. Let's provide instruments for targets that should be achieved beyond the borders of the building, beyond a very, very local environment, but also saying what could go on. Nevertheless, here an element is also very much focused on the building itself, and that's indoor air quality. So the first step, using already the instruments that I've mentioned before to address indoor air quality, which will definitely improve in the next years. But for the time being, Levels has just started, so it has been announced last month. We are still working on the technical tools, so an IT tool to use Levels more easily for the practical user, which should be available in summer next year. And then we give the whole system some time to work with. Also, the industry to recover from the coronavirus shock, so that we are not expecting an enormous uptake of Levels in 21. But we hope that this helps also to, at a certain time, to go into the direction of sustainability with a relatively simple tool. The second instrument, which should be on the DG Grow website early next year, is a point where we say, okay, guys, what I said before, we are talking about indoor air quality on different levels, on different possibilities, and the different actors, how to improve indoor air quality. So this goes away from a pure certification labeling system, more to a kind of practical guideline, what could be done when you want to increase the quality of indoor air for the exactly for the practical users, so architects, construction companies, building managers, and occupants. And hopefully, the more this website is used, also with more and more links to national and regional projects, so that there is also the practical level better included in showing examples how this could be done. All of these instruments are as such relatively useless if there is not an implementation at the national level. So the whole thing in the end stands and falls also with how much the national and regional authorities are finally then taking up all these different ideas from the Renovation Wave over EPBD levels for a wider range of policies and the practical use. So here we still see that a lot could be done, because in reality the national and regional building codes are very general when it comes to indoor air quality. Also a certain risk here that we see that in countries that are active in this field, it seems sometimes to be a race to find more substances than actually putting this into a holistic system and saying, okay, the substances and the source control is only one element and not the only one and not the most important one in the end. But there seems to be still a strong tendency to go only for labeling of construction products and ignoring other elements that could be much more interesting. And there we also hope that the Renovation Wave and the EPBD in future are setting new signals, new incentives, incentives also partly by pressure, in thinking a little bit beyond a pure source control approach. So that's it. A holistic approach is necessary. There are certain instruments. Nevertheless, the Commission is focused very much on markets, very much focused on construction products. Fortunately, with the EPBD, with the Renovation Wave, with instruments now coming more and more like levels and other guidelines, we are moving to a more holistic approach, but we are at the beginning of this wave. So there is definitely a lot of room of improvement, and hopefully also then with more feedback, with more interest and participation, that we can also improve on that level and provide more helpful supporting instruments. That's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manfred, for that very comprehensive overview of this important topic, and indeed the actions that the European Commission has been able to take to date and the prospect for the future. Of course, your words at the end that this needs a holistic approach are music to the ears of EuroACE, because we fully agree. And your words earlier about coordinating from design right through to management, including the installation and commissioning stages, resonates very much with our own messages. So now we move on to our second main speaker. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Anita Derjanec, the Managing Director of Renovate, which gathers together, she'll tell you herself, many of the most important experts and academics around these topics. Anita, the floor is yours for about 10 minutes. You are muted, Anita.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. And next slide, please. And good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation in this, for us, very important discussion. For those who don't know, REVA is a federation of building services engineering societies, and actually the association has been advocating for almost 60 years now, doing research and providing technical guidance on exactly how to provide better health, indoor climate quality and energy performances in our buildings at the same time. We have a lot of sources, some of them highlighted here. And yeah, indeed, we deal now, unfortunately, a lot with providing guidance on how to operate buildings during this COVID crisis. Next slide, please. Which is actually the starting point of the topic I was invited to talk about. So how can COVID inform future building policies and the implementation of Renovation Wave? So what COVID taught us or teaches us still, unfortunately, about our buildings is actually not that much new to those professionals and scientists involved. But we certainly see, as Adrian mentioned, that actually it's an airborne disease. Finally, this is acknowledged now by WHO and many public health organizations. And we learned that our buildings are not protecting well us from this spread of this airborne disease and eventually similar ones. And some building requirements and practices have to be adapted. But basically what it comes down to is two major things. Clean air matters, we learned, for those who were not aware of these yet, and that we need effective ventilation. We need fresh air actually to be able to mitigate this risk of the virus spread. And we also know now, that demonstrates that building design and operation has a major role indeed in infection prevention, and it impacts people's health. Now, all these points are probably not new to those who are here, or many of you. So this science and the knowledge is not new at all. What hopefully this pandemic changes is how we and everybody that uses and lives in buildings think of indoor air quality, and how we, especially decision makers, think about the economic costs and impact of not providing clean air indoors. Thank you. Next slide. So why clean air and indoor air quality matters? Without going into details, we know that we spend indoors. These figures are all from pre-COVID period, and then you can find many other figures in the report Helena just shared in the chat field. So it plays a huge role how clean or how good the air indoors is, because it may be actually 5 times more polluted nowadays in countries with high indeed source control standards and environmental standards. And we can also see the economic impacts now. So if you add COVID to these pictures, all figures actually get even more dramatic. So what I would just stress here is that the person who design our buildings and operate our buildings have more impact on our health than our doctors, maybe. Next slide, please. But we don't talk only about indoor air quality, indeed, about this context being holistic, as mentioned several times already this morning. We talk rather about indoor environmental quality, and moreover, I would like to talk actually about healthy buildings today, because this is actually the narrative where we can change the concept and be holistic if we talk about buildings being built for the people living in. And indoor air quality as such, which has different components, you can see in this nice graph from BPIE. Actually, we saw a positive trend in EU policies already in the past years, also in building related policies, that IAQ was on the rise a bit in our standards and policies. So it is mentioned in the revised DPB to some extent. Member states should account for it or acknowledge this in their long-term renovation strategies. We have an important European EPB standard as well on IAQ parameters for performance calculation. I would like to actually salute and praise the KUFE report from the Parliament on energy efficiency potential of buildings, because that is mentioning actually and calls for healthy buildings, states that renovation should improve IAQ always, and even calls for higher air quality standards indoors. So there are some good steps, but I think we think that the next DPBD might be and could be even go further to streamline these. Next slide, please. And what could be the aspects of such future building policies indeed at EU and national or regional level? So as mentioned already, I just can fully agree with the previous thoughts that we need integrated policies, and again along this thinking of people-centric buildings and sustainable construction. However, we have to talk a bit more about indeed ventilation part of this indoor environmental quality, and we need health-based ventilation guidelines, and we improve the indoor air quality standards as well. Our experts, we are convinced that actually the EPBD, because of its system performance approach, can well accommodate and integrate indoor environmental quality points and criteria, since they are also delivered by technical building systems. The future EPCs can contain an indicator, just an example from an EU project that developed based on the European standards mentioned before, a tail indicator to indicate indoor environmental quality in buildings. And we need to strengthen indeed indoor environmental quality and air quality criteria in our national and regional building codes. And digitalization is also a big game changer, because now we can monitor IAQ, indoor climate quality, along energy performance of buildings real time. Next slide, please. So what can this mean for the renovation wave? How this trickles down, hopefully, indeed, now in the implementation of the renovation wave. So as we see it, actually, the renovation wave is a one-time opportunity to kickstart a just, healthy building transformation. For that, we need the mobilization of every level, each level of the policy and the practical implementation side. From the Commission side, the European institution side, we could have still more guidance and support to member states about how to properly integrate IAQ, indoor environmental quality standards or criteria in the long-term renovation strategies, but also in the practical implementation, how to make sure that this is happening. A very important point is that to ensure that what the renovation wave happens at the highest possible quality. And if we can ensure that, then actually energy performance improvements will likely bring with themselves air and indoor environmental quality improvements as well. Certified green buildings or certified performance often means being healthier indoor environment. I would like to praise and applaud for this focus on the public sector as well. So focus on schools, social housing, eventually hospitals, nursing homes, in the renovation wave plan and strategy, because this gives a chance us to provide cleaner and indoor comfort for the most vulnerable, not only in terms of heating, but generally air quality. And these are sometimes very neglected building types, like, for example, schools. And what I would like to point out also, that technical assistance is very important indeed in the proper implementation, independent and again holistic or systemic technical assistance, which should not mean only getting the finance or getting bankable projects developed, but technical monitoring, we are convinced, should be a mandatory part of the technical assistance, so monitoring the technical quality of the building along the entire life cycle, as was again also mentioned today. And last but not least, it's a very important aspect also that we need to empower now the building users to understand the importance of indoor air quality and to be able to understand, measure, and maybe act on the indoor climate quality of their buildings. So as a closing point, actually, so the renovation wave, if we do it well, the renovation wave can help us to go against infection waves, and we should use this one-time opportunity, because if we don't do it right, then we will lose a lot of time, and who knows when we have this chance again in the future, certainly not before eventually a next pandemic comes. And thank you very much.
And thank you, Anita, for that great presentation. I can see that Riva is overflowing with good ideas about how to improve indoor air quality provisions and indoor environmental quality within the upcoming legislative reviews next year. And I guess we'll work together on that as we move forward. But you also give a great deal of food for thought to the audience and to our member companies who are online. And it's to them I now turn, and in doing so, I wanted to remind the audience that you can ask questions in the chat box. We will take those and put them back to the speakers and the panel of representatives from our companies. But first, I'm going to give each of these companies a chance to react to what they've heard, maybe come forward with further ideas to enrich the information we've put out in this webinar. And so I'm delighted to start with Simon Jones, who is the Commercial Director for the UK and Ireland from our member company, EuroACE. Simon, if you could unmute and take the floor for 3 to 4 minutes.
Thanks, Adrian. I appreciate it. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you. I thought it might be interesting to set a conversation like this from the perspective of the coalface. The ventilation industry, in particular in perspective of indoor air quality, is in a period of rapid change at the moment. Obviously, there's a welcome focus at the moment on indoor air quality, albeit for different reasons than we perhaps could have imagined a couple of years ago. But it's an opportunity nonetheless for us to keep this focus on the health of our buildings. But we're already starting to see an increased focus on the performance of buildings. This is having quite a significant impact on the supply chain. And by supply chain, I don't just mean products, I mean design, installation, commissioning, and aftercare of these buildings. At a European level, they're already starting to look at inspection of standalone ventilation systems on the understanding that we need to improve the quality of the delivered product. And for example, in Ireland, where I live, we already are seeing independent inspection of all standalone ventilation systems on handover as part of the regulation. So this is something that's happening now, and that has quite a deep impact on how we deliver ventilation into buildings. But of course, we're talking today about retrofit and scaling of retrofit and the renovation wave. And one thing that scale brings is a focus on the process of retrofit. Because after all, it becomes about managing risk. Of course, you need to manage the risk to bring in finance, of course, but also to build trust with the end user and to build demand. And again, we're starting to see focus there on building renovation passports. In the UK, for example, the implementation of something called PAS 2035, which is a standard for the process of retrofit, which defines the journey of a building. And ventilation, when we talk about ventilation, it really has got to the point now where we're having to start to measure the performance of securing air movement within buildings. And that's not really been done before. And that's seen as a challenge by the industry, but I would propose that actually it's an opportunity, because whether we like it or not, within the next decade, we're moving into a period of indoor environmental quality monitoring. Internet of Things and connected devices and buildings are now moving this conversation into a space that within a decade, there will be nowhere to hide within the built environment. You will be judged on the ongoing performance of your systems within buildings. And that really does have a dramatic impact on how we have to approach renovation, not only from an energy performance point of view, but also a health point of view. We often talk about GDP being an inadequate measure of how a society is doing, in the same way that EPCs are probably an inadequate measure of how building health is doing. And we really need to, we will be forced to move on from there. But I just wanted to finish very quickly with saying, what does this actually mean on the ground? COVID has offered me an opportunity this year, being stuck in Ireland, to help out on the ground. And I've had the opportunity to help with commissioning of systems of renovations under the national scheme here. And I've met a lot of homeowners that this stuff applies to. And I think we all have to remember that this stuff has a profound impact on people's lives and the quality of the lives in their buildings. And the first thing people talk to you about when they've had deep renovation done well to their building isn't the EPC, often isn't even the money that they save every month. It's about the health and well-being that they feel from being in this effectively a new building. And I think it's important for us to remember that sometimes, that this has profound and deep impacts on people's lives. Thank you.
Simon, thank you for those thoughts, and indeed that information from what you've experienced on the ground is always informative for us here in Brussels. So without further delay, I will move on to our next company reaction, and I'm delighted to welcome Darcy Nicole from Government Relations at our member company Carrier. Darcy, if you could unmute, and 3 to 4 minutes reaction.
Thank you, Adrian. I wanted to pick up on the approach and so some Simon saying about the inadequacy of the EPC to measure the health of buildings, and also empowering the users of buildings about the indoor air quality. I would like to say that what needs to be looked at is the political pull for better standards might be weak, but we can do more to increase the consumer pull. And it's rather like having blue flags on beaches around the EU. This might sound a bit of a strange thing, but people, when you have a blue flag, do have confidence that there's going to be clean water to bathe in. And when you've got this confidence, if a beach doesn't have a blue flag, consumers will demand it. I think we need to look at this situation for buildings. I'm not talking so much about people's homes, I'm talking about large offices, cinemas, hotels, museums, government offices, all these things which need to get the economy back, getting going again. But when you go into those spaces, you need to feel safe, that you can breathe the air just as much as you can, say, swim in a clean beach. So I think what we do need to look at more is what could be the equivalent of a blue flag in Europe. I think that is lacking is some kind of credible, independent way to measure the quality of indoor air quality and to give people confidence that they can go back into the built environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy, for that succinct but innovative idea. And I'll be interested to get reactions from the others, and in particular the European Commission, when we open the floor for the exchange in a few minutes. So now to our third member company, I'm delighted to welcome Annette Steinbusch, who's Manager of Standards and Regulations at Signify. And Annette, if you would unmute and take the floor for 3 to 4 minutes, I have your slides. I can move them forward when you ask me to.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. You might know Signify as the #1 lighting company in the world, but I would like to show 2 other topics with you today. If you can go to the next slide, please, Adrian. First of all, we think that all sorry, the next one, please. First of all, we think that all new and renovated buildings should include UVC disinfection to protect people against viruses and bacteria. UVC light is scientifically proven effective against bacteria and viruses, not just against the coronavirus, but also against other airborne pathogens such as tuberculosis and the common flu. UVC light is safe when used properly. Direct exposure to human eye and skin should be avoided in most cases, and there are several safety standards available, and the Global Lighting Association has recently published a UVC safety guide. UVC disinfection is also a proven technology, and we as Signify already supply these lamps and luminaires for many decades. By the way, you will end up using less chemicals, so there's also some other interesting links to this. What you see on the photos are some examples of UVC disinfection systems. On the left top side, you see an upper room system that is ceiling mounted. So the device where you see the blue light coming out of. On the top left, you see a wall mounted UVC disinfection device. Then at the bottom, there is an example of an induct system, which is basically inside the ventilation system. And their UVC lamps will keep the cooling coil free from biofilm. And on the right, you see a totally different example, which is for surface disinfection via a robot. And this way you can reach a lot more surfaces to disinfect, as less objects will remain in the shadow. So this was the one topic I would like to add to this discussion. And the second one is on the next slide. Indoor environmental quality leads to healthy buildings, which support health, well-being and performance of the occupants. Over the past decades, we've seen a move from buildings being judged on lowest costs to energy efficient buildings. However, the focus should no longer be only on energy efficiency. The most energy efficient building might put people in the dark, in the cold and without oxygen. Yeah, and this can never be the intention, of course. Buildings are intended to protect people from the weather and to support them and their activities such as learning in schools, working in offices and factories, and healing in healthcare facilities. People must be comfortable and healthy and safe to deliver their best performance. Although this webinar is about indoor air quality, the better name would be indoor environmental quality. Next to heating, ventilation and air conditioning, the occupants of the building also need daylight and views, electric lighting, a clean surrounding through disinfection, water quality, acoustic comfort, etc., etc. Earlier this year, at the European Sustainable Energy Week, several associations and organizations in Europe published together a first manifesto to promote indoor environmental quality. REVA and EuroACE and also the other organizations online related to indoor environmental quality topics are invited to join this cooperation. Renovation Wave initiative is the ideal program to combine setting mandatory minimum requirements for indoor environmental quality with saving energy at the same time, and thus making the next step towards healthy buildings. Thank you for listening.
And thank you, Annette, for introducing those additional ideas and thoughts. And indeed, UVC looks like a very versatile and interesting solution. So a final reminder to put questions in the chat box while I move to the last of the reactions from our member companies. I am delighted to now welcome Elizabeth Hoffman, Senior Policy Advisor at Velux. Elizabeth, if you would unmute, 3 to 4 minutes.
Yes, thanks for all these interesting presentations. Some of you may think Velux just sells roof windows, but we actually think of ourselves to sell daylight and fresh air. So today's discussion is very important. And I think a lot of very important points have already been raised. And I fully agree, particularly with the remarks made on healthy buildings. Because we agree that when designing sustainable buildings, we need to think of the social dimension and really keep the users of the buildings at the center, balancing all the aspects related to energy, environment, and health. And that's why I think the fact that the Renovation Wave strategy is referring to sustainable buildings and not just energy efficient buildings is a big step in the right direction. And we now really have the opportunity to take a more holistic approach and focus more on indoor climate as a whole, and also ensure that all the actions that we take actually go hand in hand by factoring in all the environmental aspects, as mentioned before. And we hope particularly also that the upcoming European Bauhaus will look into these wider aspects as well when identifying new ways to build more sustainably going forward. Now, as regards the upcoming legislative revisions, we think that the EPBD should describe in more detail minimum requirements, both for indoor air, but also for environmental quality. And it should be technology neutral and use CO2 as the main indicator, because we believe that a combination of natural and mechanical ventilation can achieve the best results for building users. And when it comes to natural ventilation, smart sensor-based products, for example, can also play a more important role here in the future. And as was said before, we should also continue all the work done around standards and guidelines on residential and natural ventilation. And to conclude, I just wanted to briefly mention 2 examples of how we at Velux try to contribute to this discussion, not just on indoor air quality, but also indoor environmental quality. We just started a project with a Scottish university to identify how sensor-based ventilation control systems can affect the indoor air quality in bedrooms by comparing homes with and without the system. And we should have some results on this at some point next year. And also, we started 5 years ago to publish a healthy homes barometer focusing on different elements contributing to a good indoor climate. And the 2020 edition is just about to be published, looking into how sustainable buildings can contribute to a green recovery, mostly focusing on previous findings that we made, but work on the 2020 edition is already in full swing too. So those were just the few remarks that I wanted to make.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for bringing that round of reactions from our member companies to a close. And as we've heard, a great deal of information has now been put into this webinar. So it's time to start an exchange. And Elizabeth, you actually anticipated one of the questions that's come to me. So I can start there. And it reads, considering the importance of ventilation, my question would be how to measure it. Shall we be based on CO2 concentrations, which are often used as a proxy for ventilation, or which alternative way would the experts suggest? So, Elizabeth, in your reaction, you suggested CO2 as the main way of measuring indoor air quality, but I wonder, would others like to react? And I would go back to Anita first and then see what Anita thinks about the best way to measure indoor air, ventilation. Anita.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, from one side, it's a very good proxy and easy to understand for the end user, and since CO2 is the most and one of the sources that we cannot emit unless we are plants or cannot cancel, so that we also suggest to use now or during COVID, actually, because it's a proxy even for other viruses and even other pollutants. However, there are other measurements too, so we should not forget that that actually CO2 does not necessarily measure other pollutants, right? Harmful substances. But these devices are out there even for residential applications and usually are integrated. So you measure CO2 and the eventual VOC, so other or small particles that can harm you. So we would, the long term or in integrated digital monitoring, it could be both.
Okay, would any of the other speakers, including from the companies, like to react? Maybe Simon?
Yeah, I could say something very quickly, Adrian. I think the important thing with using monitoring for indoor air quality is that the devil is always in the detail. So CO2 is just a simple example. CO2 is a great proxy, particularly in spaces that are naturally ventilated and highly occupied, classrooms being a prime example. And they can be used very usefully to determine the required air change rates, for example, for that room to be healthy. But they may not necessarily be as good in spaces that aren't so occupied by people, and other devices or metrics may need to be used. So like with a lot of this stuff, the important thing is not to look for silver bullets, is to understand the science and apply proper engineering, because you can find yourself down dead ends very easily.
Okay, Simon, thanks. And maybe a last reaction on this first question from Manfred, if you would like to say what the Commission is thinking about as a measurement for good ventilation.
I have to admit, I'm a civil engineer, not a mechanical engineer, and in this specific case, I don't have a good idea anyway. So maybe Paul at a later stage can answer this question. Mm-hmm. For us, when it comes to since we are dealing with indoor air more from the product side, I'm a little bit at loss here.
Okay, Manfred. Sorry to put you on the spot. So let's move on.
No problem.
Who is that? Darcy, please.
I think just a comment that you can of course put filters and UV lights in systems. But what we are seeing is that customers before were not willing to pay the extras to have a high level of filtration, for example, or UV lights. But what we are seeing now is that building specifiers are now much more likely to see that as a package which they have to provide for customers. So that's good. Is a good news. The other side, I think, is maybe more talking about clean air. So people have the right for clean air, and you have air cleaners when you're going into buildings like cinemas and things. So technology is moving forward, but a lot of it's going to be driven by building owners insisting that they have the highest tech and not just getting the cheapest options.
I think you make a very interesting point, Darcy, and there's a responsibility on building owners and operators to ensure the health and safety of those that occupy and use their buildings. So indeed, increasing awareness about the need for clean air and disinfection. Clearly, the COVID crisis has shifted the dial on that rather significantly, and it will indeed be interesting to watch in the future how things develop. But let me come on to the second question that I wanted to pose to the group, which I find very interesting from a EuroACE perspective. And that's the question. The questioner made too long a question, I have to say, so I'm just going to go to the heart of it. The question really relates to renovation of buildings and how often in a renovation project, the ventilation issues get a bit left behind because the focus can often be on other issues, including energy performance. And the questioner is really asking whether the EPPD revision is an opportunity here, and whether or not it would be a good idea to have regular inspection of standalone ventilation systems throughout the entire lifetime of the systems. And a final thought in this long question is the Commission has imposed maximum outdoor air pollutant concentrations to member states. What about doing the same for indoor air pollutants? And maybe on that last part, we could start with Manfred, because maybe indoor air pollutants arise largely from the products within buildings. Manfred.
Well, as I said, the first step in this direction is the EU LCI list. So to set thresholds for buildings. It seems that the member states or the ones that are looking into indoor air are taking this list over, and they have no problems because the scientific baseline is quite fine. However, for me, one of the issues why I'm a little bit careful with this list is, in the end, it just gives you a pass-fail system. So there is, on one hand, no chance to show any improvement, which makes it a little bit difficult. It just says it is not that worse that it is dangerous, but that's it. So you can't actually improve because there is nothing in between. The second problem is exactly when you come to parts of society with weaker immune system, like children, like elderly people, like sick people. So all these buildings where you have kindergarten, schools, hospitals would follow under the same principle, and you can't actually do any adjustments to increase the safety here. So let's say as a first step, it's there. If for the time being, there is not an intention to say, okay, we take this automatically on board. For this, we need a little bit more work. And in particular, what is needed right now, what we are working on, is to reduce the complexity of a list of 160 substances that nobody, not even I've been now for 20 years in this job, and I'm still a civil engineer, and I still don't know what most of these substances are about. I couldn't compare if I get a list of 160 substances from one product and another one from another, and I couldn't compare which one is now better or worse. So the whole idea right now, that's the main work that we are trying to do right now, is to reduce the complexity of this information to a simple class system where you can say, okay, this is class A, this is class B, partly with fail-safe issues like for CMR, so for carcinogenic, mutagenic, and toxic for reproductivity substances. These are our main things, simplifying the complexity of the information, and then we can look into what could be done, and then most likely we got also more member states on board who are interested in this, who would like to do something, but for the time being, they don't have the resources to do something that is as complex as it is right now.
Okay, thank you, Manfred. And before we say welcome to our final speaker, I wanted to just go back to the other stakeholders on the line and pull out this part of the question and ask you, would you support the idea that the Commission should, in the revision of the EPPD, make compulsory the assessment of controlled air renewal for each renovation project? Anita, is that a good idea?
Yes, thank you, Edwin. Yes, for us, definitely it's a good idea to either policy competencies there are at European level that it should be fully exploited to make it as much obligatory or as much followed as possible. So we need to talk about ventilation and air quality as well. If you talk about heating, building automation, cooling already, why not to tackle better also air quality and the related ventilation?
Okay. Would the company representatives agree? I'll go down through you in the list we have. Simon first.
Yes, I'd completely agree. And in fact, I'd see it as a missed opportunity. If we don't do that, then we, as I said in my piece earlier on, we'll inevitably end up in a position where buildings are monitored. And this is a chance for us to get the starting point correct. You know, I think we should be seeing this as an opportunity to get that starting point correct. And it will be a missed opportunity if not done, I believe.
Darcy?
Yes, when I see schemes for certifying healthy buildings in the States, you've got to inspect them, but then you've got to recertify every 6 months. And I think that's more pressure on how the buildings is managed. So I also agree that monitoring or certification every 6 months makes sure that the building is managed and operated correctly.
Okay, interesting. Annette?
Yeah, I agree, and I would like to add that next to measures for indoor air quality, we should really also include measures for all the other parts of indoor environmental quality. Also, no renovation without the renovation of lighting, for instance, because that's equally important to the health and well-being and performance of the people inside the building. So in general, just having mandatory energy saving or energy efficiency requirements on buildings is not enough. We have to balance that and make sure that also mandatory minimum requirements for indoor environmental quality will be set at the same time. Because in the end, we do this for the people inside those buildings.
Indeed. So, Elizabeth, do we have a clean sweep? Does everyone find this a good idea?
Fully agree. We need a more holistic approach and look into all those aspects that were just discussed. Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much to the 6 speakers so far. I'm absolutely delighted now to welcome Pau Garcia-Audi from DG Enner. He's a policy officer, very familiar with the Renovation Wave and indeed with the Buildings Directive. Pau, as you know, we've been, and he has just joined us 2 minutes ago. So Pau, as you know, we've been discussing indoor air quality this morning. And your colleague across at DG Grow has stated that at DG Grow they are more focused on product level, but they have an awareness of the need to think about indoor air quality along all steps of the value chain, from design through installation, selection of products, behavior within the building, and management of those systems. Then we heard from Riva, who have developed specific expertise now in COVID-19 and in what the fact that it's an airborne disease has taught us about buildings, emphasizing the need for ensuring indoor air quality, making the point that the person who designs your building has more impact on your health than your doctor. I thought that was quite a telling point. And then our member companies reacted, generally also emphasizing the importance of the need for high indoor air quality, bringing forward some ideas around how the Buildings Directive could, for example, be enhanced in the review process just ahead. And all of us are waiting to hear how you believe the Renovation Wave strategy can link to the indoor air quality agenda. So, Pau, you practically have the last word. You can take 7 to 9 minutes. So if you could unmute, over to you.
Hello, good morning, Adrian. Thanks a lot for the summary. And thank you, if after this meeting you could send me a brief summary also of the session, because we are very, very interested to hear what you discussed today. And sorry I could not make it earlier. I have to wholeheartedly agree with you on the issue that ventilation and providing adequate indoor conditions is critical. I remember it was the first ever module we had on building and on building design. So before we learned anything else, they told us you have to be able to ensure this, because indeed, as you say, people's health are in your hands when you're managing a building. So the EPBD energy performance is a bit strange in this regard, because it regulates on the energy performance, not so much on in the indoor conditions. But it's very clear on stating that the energy performance starts as soon as these conditions are met. It does not come, energy performance does not come to the expense of indoor conditions. And for this, we have to be absolutely clear. Different things that we're looking at a regulatory level in order to improve indoor conditions. We have, for example, the possible development of inspections for standalone ventilation systems. We carried out a study on this last year, and it already highlighted the potential to increase air quality and indoor living conditions, much more so than actual energy savings. So in fact, the level of energy savings was negative, meaning we were spending more energy because we needed to ensure good indoor conditions. And that was because a lot of systems out there are in poor conditions or poorly designed, or the purpose of the building has changed and the ventilation system has not changed. So that's on the one hand side. We also have the Smart Renovation Indicator, which accounts for indoor air quality, and not just indoor air quality on a single moment, but the monitoring of indoor air quality and maintaining that indoor air quality. So that's very important for us. And finally, we have the Renovation Wave, and there high air quality is recognized as one of the key principles, together with high environmental standards and comfort conditions, because we see that energy renovations can be an opportunity to improve living conditions. So not just indoor air quality, but you mentioned, for example, also lighting conditions and removal of harmful substances in buildings. So the Renovation Wave is looking at different ways of how we can do this. It touches on various different areas. It doesn't just touch on the EPBD, but also on how we implement the use of EU funds for energy renovation. So we want to make sure that these kind of elements are taken into account when designing interventions on the field. So I think this is as much as I can say right now, because a lot of these measures are just starting to go to be put in place now. But I am very, very interested to hear about the conclusions of this session, because I only managed to get the last one.
Mm-hmm. There was one thing that came up during the presentations and reactions that might be of interest, and maybe you would have a thought on it. and that was that the novel concept within the Renovation Wave strategy of the Bauhaus platform, could it play a role in ensuring that high quality results from energy renovation that are high quality indoor environmental conditions, I mean, can result from energy renovations? And if so, I mean, and maybe you can say a few words about the concept of the Bauhaus platform, because we have designers, architects, engineers on this webinar who are listening and who may well be able to contribute this expertise into that quality platform.
I can't say much about the Bauhaus because it's not an area where I'm directly involved at the moment. It is definitely an area for sharing experience and highlighting good practices, and I think that demonstrating that energy efficiency can go, and specifically energy efficiency renovation, can go hand in hand with the improved indoor environmental conditions. That's something that we have to demonstrate. On the Bauhaus initiative and how it's going to play out, what I can say is for now, you can indicate your interest in participating. Some of you have already done it. And as soon as we have a structure set up, we will start contacting those parties that have expressed interest to discuss the next steps. But for now, we are really on the very, very early stages of development. Starting in early 2021, we want to start this engagement aspect of the initiative.
Okay, and another thing that we heard about was the levels work across in DG Environment. It was mentioned by Manfred Fuchs from DG Grow. To what extent do you think the rollout of levels could be encouraged by the Renovation Wave strategy, and where do you see its place in this this constellation now of policy approaches that could help improve indoor environmental and air quality?
That's a very tricky question because levels is managed by DG Environment. So I don't want to get into anybody's toes by saying something I shouldn't, or by advancing something that shouldn't be advanced. It is an important part of the Renovation Wave. The whole aspect of the life cycle of the building, and what materials do we put in a building, etc. I always think that in terms of renovation, at least we start from a very good point, because we are already reusing as much as possible in most cases, and especially we're reusing the structure of the building, which is where most of the CO2 emissions embedded in the building are concentrated. Mm-hmm. Exactly how the levels is going to play out, I'm not sure. But it is one of the elements that we highlighted as that we need to be able to put in place in the coming years. So I can't say anything about the specific initiative because that's really the role of DG Environment. But we have featured it prominently in the Renovation Wave because we think it needs to have this prominent role.
Okay.
May I intervene here just for a second? Because absolutely. We are the co-chef de file, so to say. So it's definitely a DG Environment initiative, but I was quite involved in this work for the last years, and I'm the one working now on the IT tool for levels as such. Levels is for both new buildings and renovation. So there was never a difference made, because exactly a lot of the stakeholders were mentioning that they are interested in getting information in how to do sustainability also in renovation. That also shows why certain elements are included in levels right now, others are not, because there was a stronger interest and a stronger basis for doing this. In the end, it's more the other way around. You have the renovation wave as the political instrument to push forward, and you have the practical instruments for doing something on sustainability on different levels of complexity for the designers and for the building managers in particular. So these were the two main target groups who could do this. So it's a supporting element. It's not an element alone, and it's not an element that could actually push in a certain direction. It's a supporting thing that was meant to be.
Okay, Manfred, thank you for that clarification. It's very, very good to hear that from you. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we've come to the end of the time we had allowed, and we've had excellent presentations from all of our 7 speakers and panelists. I'm not going to try to summarize all the rich information, but rather say that it's evident from this webinar this morning the central importance that indoor environmental quality is now taking in the minds of many companies and in the minds of the policymakers and researchers. And we can see that there are many very good ideas about how EU policy instruments can be reinforced to ensure better indoor environmental quality moving forward. We've also learned that the COVID-19 crisis has actually changed mindsets among building owners, and that highlights what Anita so eloquently said, is that the Renovation Wave strategy is a once-off opportunity to avoid future infection waves. And I think that's quite a striking sentence from the presentations of this morning. So, as I said at the head of the webinar was recorded, and the recordings and the PowerPoint will be provided to all those who registered. Thank you those who asked questions to animate our exchange. I hope you've enjoyed this session as much as I have. And with that, I wish you a good day, and look forward to our next webinar, which you should look out for. It will be in December on a date yet to be announced, but it will also examine an aspect of the renovation wave. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye-bye.